Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are shaping up to be some of the most anticipated Pokemon games in a long while. It is true the Legends Arceus had a ton of hype surrounding the release, but it wasn't exactly a generation debut title. And even then, it wasn't exactly a traditional Pokemon game in the sense that we're all used to. The hype and build-up surrounding Scarlet and Violet at the moment has an atmosphere of promise, at least from my perspective. The ball has already begun to roll with these open zones they've been experimenting with ever since Sword and Shield, not to mention the newer features like full multiplayer and type-changing Pokemon. For the first time in a while, I'm truly excited to see what they'll do with these new ideas. So let's go ahead and take a look at all these new features and mechanics that have been announced for the game so far, as well as how they might come to be and how I think/hope they will be once we get the game in our hands. Starting off is something I think has kinda gone under the radar for the most part, and that's having a real genuine difference between the two games. We Pokemon fans always have fun debates over which version of the same game is better, but that's just the thing. Really, they're the same game, and usually the answer as to which one is better is more about preference, or the copy that you blindly picked as a kid because the guy on the box looked cool. However, this time around there might actually be a sizable difference between each version. Enough of a difference at least to actually justify having two different versions of the same game. Now we definitely know the real reason for having two versions of the same game is actually about having more sales. But if that's going to be the case, I've wanted to see them give players a reason to actually buy the other version of the game for some time now, other than just having a few version exclusive Pokemon. We already know that which game you get will determine which professor, school, and legendary, you end up with, which in this game seems like it will make quite a big difference in your experience. Not so much which bike you're on, but since the school will be playing a large part throughout the game's story, my guess is that the professors will take on a more active role than usual, not just giving you a starter and standing there all game. Additionally, we know that each school will have a generally different focus. Of course, Naranja Academy will focus on the past. My guess is that it will be things we may associate more with the humanities. And Uva will be more futuristic, with a more sciencey vibe, focusing on what will happen rather than what has. With this distinct difference, the kinds of Pokemon studies within the Academy could differ greatly. Let's take Wooper for example. Perhaps members of Naranja Academy will study how Paldean Wooper came to be the way it is, try to figure out how and why it was forced out of its home onto land, and attempting to see how this change altered their habits from original Wooper. Whereas students at Uva Academy will ask how Paldean Wooper will change in the future, perhaps being more focused on its biology, as well as how that biology may progress with the changing environment moving forward. In fact, our homeroom and biology teacher, Mr. Jock, is already color-themed in favor of Violet. While I do think he will appear in both games, to me the fact that his colors and topic are both leaning towards Violet suggests that different topics holding more weight from version to version could be a real possibility. This would also give them a reason to actually put content into the schools that doesn't necessarily progress the story. The content would vary between the two versions, and both sides could give excellent yet very different insights into the Pokemon world. So already, the question between which game you get could be a question of what part of the Pokemon world you're more interested in. They haven't really put a major difference into game variations since Black and White 1 and 2, and even then, most of the changes were in later parts of the game. Things like Black City and White Forest give me a reason to like my copy more than the other one, but it also gives trainers who get both copies a reason to get the other one. At least something a little bit more than Pokédex completion. Again, it's about making the choice between the two games more than just what color do I like more. But for those who don't want to ask this rather daunting question of which part of the Pokemon world do I like more, Game Freak has given the perfect opportunity to just pick which one you think is cooler, with Armarouge and Ceruledge. Both these designs are absolutely wicked. And while I was initially siding with Ceruledge, Armarouge is starting to look pretty dope too. To be honest, I'm not too sure what the deal with these guys is yet. If these guys are legendaries, pseudo-legends, or just plain Pokemon that are getting a little special treatment. A little bit of that Charizard budget. Regardless of what they are, I definitely want to use one on my team for my first playthrough, and I have a feeling most trainers feel the same way. Like I said before, what game you're playing will determine which legendary bike you get to ride. No more debates about Acro versus Mach Bike. Now the debate will be wheels versus legs. Regardless of what you choose, the functionality will be the same, ferrying you all around the Paldea region. And before jumping into the implications of what that means, I'd point out the obvious resemblance to the rideable Pokemon in PLA. However, where in PLA, you get one Pokemon for swimming, climbing, flying, and running, Miraidon and Koraidon are an all-in-one deal. So going based on this, I think it's reasonable to assume that the Paldea region's landscape and environment will be similar to that of PLA, but on an even bigger scale. Almost as if the wild areas in Generation 8 were basically the entire game. This further supports my theory that the wild area looks like a test for Generation 9 Overworld, which gets even better when looking at the other features we've seen so far, like the Pokemon Center gas stations I pointed out in a previous video, as well as each major storyline having an independent progression. These gas stations are like outdoor Pokemon centers that I'm guessing you can use on the go with your bike. Additionally, having separate story progression one sure that players can explore at their own pace, rather than needing to go in a particular order, which works much better for an open world game. Generation 9 is really encouraging us to get to know the region, along with all its nature, people, and Pokemon. Exploration in this game will be a primary focus for the content, and my prediction, and really more so my hope, is that the world will have a chance to really feel like a lived-in place, an environment that players could really read into what the world is like through its people, cultures, and atmosphere. Each city, Pokemon, or even NPCs saying something about the area's past or future. I mean, how perfect would it be to learn about the past of these in-game areas and how they came to be the way they are, as well as speculate on and guide its future endeavors. In a generation focused on past and future, having both these ideas be reinforced by the world itself would almost work too well, while doing an incredible amount of immersive world building. Almost like combining that feeling of discovery that PLA gave us with a more detailed and nuanced world of the mainline games. For as much as I like PLA, at times the world did feel a little empty, so I'm hoping that this time around, it'll feel a little bit more lively, and as always, giving me plenty of cool little hideaways to hang out in for a while. In most Pokemon games, you get all the usual stories happening at the same time. The championship with the gym badges in the Pokemon League, of course the saving the world plot typically involving the box legendaries and the evil team, as well as the rival or rivals storyline, who also end up helping you save the world. While the evil team has become less world-endingly evil with time, including this generation, each one of these stories will get its own section within the game. Again, as I described in my breakdown video, Scarlet and Violet's story will be broken up into 3 parts, each with their own independent story progression, meaning that trainers will have the freedom to choose any path at any time. So gym progress won't be locked behind story progress after every gym, like in most games. While before, these breaks in the story helped to smooth out the experience and not have the same thing happening the whole time, now however, the player is free to choose if they want to break up their gameplay and do many things, or just focus on one thing. A more personalized experience, hopefully leading to a better one for all players. In addition to this, each path will be free to try new things, narratively and mechanically. For example, the Starfall Streets path is something we haven't really seen with the Evil Squad before. Of course, they've always had their bases filled with grunts, but here their bases will serve as a location of their own, involving its own kind of raid-like game mode, where you fight a barrage of grunts Pokemon before facing off against their leader, and their car. I wish I was joking, but I completely missed that in my breakdown. The car will attack you. Although I'm a little skeptical of the auto battle feature that will be included in these raids, as I said, I'm hoping that it will still be fun without using it. My real hope is that these little bases will be designed more like challenge runs, where the further you get along, the harder they become, requiring more strategy, planning, or even team building. For example, we know that Mela has a Torkoal, and maybe the first time you fight her, it's just a normal Torkoal, with White Smoke or Drought as the ability. But by the final battle, she reveals her real ace Torkoal, which has a unique ability, one that really stands out like Water Absorb. Having a boss battle like this forces the player to really think outside the box. For example, here the player might want to use something like a rock or ground type move, but her Torkoal could have something like Iron Defense, which would be great against the mostly physical type damaging move pools of ground and rock. In the end, I really want to see the squad leaders like Mela feel like an actual raid boss, even if these super hard challenges are post-game battles to test the player's skills and maybe unlock cool rewards. The second path is the Path of Legends, something that I'm actually very excited to see. I predicted before that each Legends Path quest will get increasingly more difficult and intriguing with time. The first quest will be what we learned about in the last trailer, helping Arven retrieve the Herba Mystica from the Titan Cloth. And I think the next few will be centered around your other friends, like Penny and Nimona, who also help defeating Titans. My hope is that by the time you get to the last Legends Path quest, you'll be facing off against some world-ending legendary Pokemon. You know, typical Pokemon stuff. What I want for this path isn't so much based on things we've seen in the trailer, but general trends from past Pokemon games. It's likely that the explanation for these giant Titan Pokemon will have something to do with the main gimmick, terrestrializing, which is another phenomena I believe will be explained in this path. Whatever the relation is, my guess is that it will have to do with the giant hole in the middle of the map, as well as the life energy that's been used for every gimmick like Mega Evolutions, Z-Crystals, and Gigantamax. Whatever is causing these giant and type-changing Pokemon will most likely be the major moving force in this path, as well as the game's final boss. It's hard to say exactly what this force is going to be, since the guys in the box are actually going to be our companions, but if anything, that actually makes me more excited to jump into the games and see what it has in store. Finally, we have the Champion's Path, and to be honest, I'm not expecting many changes here. What I will say is that they might be actually doing something for the gym leaders that I've been hoping for a long time, using a theme more than relying on just one type. Kind of like a Steven Stone. Now, these gym leaders definitely have one specific type, but as we saw in the last trailer, the grass gym leader used Sudowoodo, a rock Pokemon, and turned him into truly Wudo, gaining the grass type. While this isn't exactly what I was hoping for, the idea is definitely in the right direction. It might open the door to more Steven Stone-like themed gyms, rather than just one type. Additionally, these gym tests that were announced don't seem much different than previous games. Sword and Shield, as well as every game before it, had some kind of task or puzzle needed to get to the gym leader. So I'm not really interested or worried about what these might be. Still, my hope is that they teach us something about the gym leader's personality, and why they became the gym leader here. Use the gym puzzles to show the players what's so special about this gym leader, and why they were chosen over anyone else. While gym leaders are usually pretty static one-note characters, giving them more detail and background that tells us about who they are will make them feel more like an asset to the town, rather than just the town playing host to the gym. The online multiplayer experience in Sword and Shield wasn't perfect, but I do have to say, it was pretty cool to see other trainers running around the wild area with me, as well as seeing the different pop-ups for the events going on. However, Scarlet and Violet are taking multiplayer to a whole new level, allowing trainers to play with up to 3 other friends along their whole journey. Using what's called the Poke Portal, you can connect wirelessly to local or internet connection to play with friends or trainers from all over the world. And of course, you'll get to participate in stuff like Terra Raid battles together. Based on the wording from the Pokemon website, it doesn't seem like you'll be able to do battles together against wild Pokemon or NPCs, which is a little disappointing. However, the feature will include some kind of spectator mode to cheer on your friends in battle, as well as including a fan favorite feature, following Pokemon. Multiplayer to this level has been a very long time coming for Pokemon, and for the first time, I'm excited to have my adventure in the same space as my friends. Funny enough, they had something kind of similar to this in Pokemon Black and White 1 and 2, with the Interlink. But to be honest, I didn't get to use it much, and I haven't heard it brought up in years. So it feels kind of strange to be welcoming back a feature that we kinda had already as big as this. Nevertheless, my hope is that players will have more opportunities than just walking next to each other. Having things to actually do with one another would really take the experience to the next level. I know there's going to be Terra Raid battles, but besides not having to wait for everyone to go every turn, it's basically the same idea as Dynamax Raid Dens. For example, having some kind of official racing mechanic, running and flying around the region, or maybe even having a puzzle that requires 2 or more people to complete. And the reward for these races and puzzles could be TMs, battle items, or things that keep the players coming back to the minigames. This way the players could even race from raid battle to raid battle, encouraging a more fun and interactive multiplayer experience. Given that this is technically the first time a feature like this has been in a game before, my guess is that it will be pretty bare bones. But my hope is that it lays the foundation for Generation 10 to have crazy shared world features that really make the multiplayer feel like a world full of trainers. The treasure hunt was something that was brought up in the second trailer, and when being introduced, it was also talking about getting to know the region, which is part of the reason why I believe exploration will be such a big priority for these games. While I can't say for sure, I definitely think that the treasure hunt will ultimately not focus on an actual treasure, but will ultimately be a lesson about the importance of the journey rather than the destination. After all, it is a school project, so I wouldn't be surprised if teaching some kind of lesson about how to be a good trainer was the ultimate goal of the treasure hunt in the first place. The lesson would of course be something cheesy, like,
whether looking at our past or our future, what's really important is the time we spend with each other and our Pokemon.
Which of course would be an important lesson for students of either academy. In a way, it's a lesson that can touch on all 3 paths despite having independent progression. Whether finding legends, seeking glory, or fighting rivals, what's important is not what comes before or after. What's important is the journey itself, and all the experiences you have and memories you make with your team. And last but not least, type-changing Pokemon. As an idea, terrestrialization is really cool. Not even a day into its announcement, and trainers are already thinking of all kinds of crazy ideas. Some of them even being referenced by Game Freak themselves. I can already tell that this mechanic will bring a very interesting additional level of play to every battle, one that will get players thinking outside the box. But as I've already expressed, I'm not entirely happy with the execution here. The terrestrialization mechanic visually is goofy at best, and while I almost kind of like it just for how jank it looks, I do hope that similar to Dynamax, later we'll get more information that makes the whole thing a little more intriguing. Gigantamax was the only part of the Dynamax mechanic that even remotely got my attention, and I'm hoping that we get something similar for terrestrialization. And while I'm not exactly sure what it could be, I do have one idea. Let's say you have a Pokemon with a specific Terra type. Instead of crystallizing and putting on a hat, they transform into another version of that Pokemon from the past or future with that exact Terra type. And to really make them stand out a little more from normal Terra Pokemon, it could allow them to change their ability to a better one. So for example, let's say you have a Torkoal, and its Terra type is water. Then, by terrestrializing and transforming into this past or future form of Torkoal, you gain access to a new ability. Let's say, I don't know, Water Absorb? This would still kind of keep my past and future transformations from the My Hopes video, while also allowing for all Pokemon to take part in this new type-changing mechanic. Even the Terra raid battles will be a perfect spot to stick these form-changing encounters, just like Gigantamax Pokemon in Dynamax raid dens. I know I'm really pushing these transformation ideas, but come on Game Freak, give me a more interesting reason to hit the button, please. And those are the major new features announced so far, as well as my thoughts and predictions while we're in this build-up period. Everyone's got some pretty cool ideas as to how the next generation could be amazing. My only hope is that it can stand up to the hype train. So what do you think of all the new features so far? And how do you think they'll play out? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all again for watching. Like if you did, sub for more, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.